The US military's dramatic raid in Caracas, leading to the capture of Nicolas Maduro, has sent shockwaves across the globe. At first glance, it seems like just another chapter in the saga of US-Venezuela tensions, but there's more at stake than meets the eye. What if this intervention is about more than just regime change? What if, hidden behind the headlines, lies a carefully calculated move that could change the global balance of power? For Vladimir Putin, this isn't just a political game. It's a high-stakes gamble that could reshape Russia's economic future. But how exactly does Trump's bold action impact Putin's strategy? And what are the ripple effects on the energy markets, Russian oil revenues, and even the war in Ukraine? Stay tuned as we unpack the real story behind Trump's Venezuela intervention and why it's Putin's biggest worry yet. Let's start by looking at the immediate implications of this move. To understand the stakes, we need to zoom out and grasp the broader context. The United States' intervention in Venezuela is not just about overthrowing a leader. It's part of a much bigger geopolitical puzzle. For Russia, Venezuela has long been an ally, both a strategic partner in Latin America and a vital link in Russia's oil export chain. Over the years, Russia has poured significant investments into Venezuela's oil industry, betting on a future where both nations could benefit from shared resources and influence. But the US military's bold move throws everything into uncertainty. The loss of Maduro would not only devastate Russian investments, but also challenge Russia's role in shaping global oil markets. What does this mean for Moscow's position in the world's energy debate, and how will it affect the broader power dynamics between East and West? Let's take a closer look at how the historical relationship between Russia and Venezuela has evolved. The Russia-Venezuela relationship didn't happen overnight. It's been forged over 2 decades of mutual interests, beginning in the early 2000s, when Hugo Chavez sought an ally in his fight against US influence. Russia, eager to expand its geopolitical reach, was all too willing to oblige, offering Venezuela military support and investments in oil exploration. In exchange, Venezuela opened its doors to Russian oil companies and arms deals. But it wasn't just about business. Both countries shared a common adversary in the US, a bond that solidified over time. For Russia, Venezuela became a crucial partner in securing its sphere of influence in Latin America. Meanwhile, for Venezuela, Russian arms and oil investments helped counterbalance its political isolation and economic challenges. However, the heart of this partnership, Venezuela's oil, has become a double-edged sword. With global oil prices fluctuating and US intervention now a reality, the future of this relationship is under threat. Now let's examine how the fallout from this military action is already beginning to unfold. The first immediate fallout from the US raid in Caracas was swift and devastating. The capture of Maduro alongside key government officials sent ripples through the global community, but it hit Russia especially hard. Years of investment in Venezuela's oil sector, oil fields, refineries, and infrastructure are now in jeopardy. What was once seen as a profitable and strategic partnership has been left in tatters, as the US has effectively crippled Venezuela's ability to govern and operate as an independent state. For Moscow, this is more than just a loss of investments. It's a direct blow to its position as a major player in global energy markets. The idea that Russia could be pushed out of one of its last strongholds in the Western Hemisphere is a nightmare scenario. Moreover, the loss of Maduro could create a power vacuum that Washington may try to fill with a pro-US regime, further isolating Russia and undercutting its influence in Latin America. But this crisis goes deeper than just the immediate loss. Let's uncover the hidden mechanisms at play. At the heart of this crisis lies a deeper, more complex issue for Russia: its shadow fleet. This is the network of ships and tanker trucks used to bypass international sanctions and carry Russian oil to markets around the world. For years, the fleet has allowed Moscow to continue its oil exports without interference, despite global sanctions on its energy sector. However, with the US now exerting direct pressure on Venezuela, the risks to this clandestine network have become clear. If the US begins targeting Russian tankers involved in Venezuela's oil trade, it could disrupt one of Russia's most critical sources of revenue. Moreover, any attempt by Washington to capture or seize Russian tankers would escalate tensions, pulling Russia into a direct confrontation over its shadow fleet. This would have far-reaching consequences, not only for Russia's oil exports, but also for its broader geopolitical strategy. The stakes for Putin are high. If Russia's shadow fleet is dismantled, it could mark the beginning of a new phase of economic warfare, one that challenges the very foundation of Russia's energy strategy. But the situation doesn't stop there. There's a second, even more dangerous crisis on the horizon. Let's explore what happens next. The second crisis is even more dire than the first. With US forces now emboldened after their success in Venezuela, there's a real possibility of the West turning its attention back to Ukraine. This could mean a surge in US pressure on Russia, specifically targeting its role in the ongoing conflict with Ukraine. While Washington has long placed sanctions on Russia and supported Ukraine, the situation in Venezuela has triggered a shift in global dynamics, one that could embolden further actions against Russia. The US has already shown willingness to act decisively against Russian assets. Seizing Venezuelan oil tankers is just the beginning. Should this escalate, Russia may face a more coordinated and intense campaign from the West to destabilize its operations in Ukraine, tightening the noose on Putin's ambitions in the region. Putin knows that the future of Ukraine holds far greater significance than Venezuela. If the US uses the Venezuela operation to fuel renewed Western unity against Russian expansionism in Ukraine, the situation could spiral into a more dangerous geopolitical standoff. Now let's consider how this turmoil affects the everyday lives of ordinary Russians and the broader population. For the average Russian citizen, the fallout from the US intervention in Venezuela is far from an abstract issue. As the global economy is shaken, so too is the stability of Russia's domestic markets. Oil prices, already struggling due to international pressures, could plummet even further, leading to a ripple effect on the cost of living. Gas prices may soar, and essential goods could become harder to find. At the same time, Russia's military and diplomatic endeavors in places like Venezuela will feel the weight of international condemnation. The economic strain may only worsen, especially with sanctions tightening and global oil revenues declining. For many Russians, these developments will hit home, not as a political abstraction, but as a personal crisis. Higher living costs, job instability, and a deepening sense of national isolation. But Putin's ability to manage this crisis may depend on his ability to maintain control over the narrative. He needs the public to believe in the righteousness of Russia's actions and their role in fighting against a hostile West. Let's zoom out now and examine the broader global implications of this intervention. The US intervention in Venezuela isn't just a blow to Russia, it sends ripples across the entire global order. As tensions rise between Washington and Moscow, other global players are starting to take sides, whether directly or indirectly. Russia's allies, particularly in the Middle East and Latin America, are watching closely. Some are even beginning to question their own alliances as the balance of power shifts in favor of a more aggressive US foreign policy. Meanwhile, NATO countries, particularly in Europe, are facing increased pressure to align with US policy despite their reservations. The growing divide between the US and its European allies could further destabilize the Western Bloc, just as it opens doors for Russia to exploit fissures in the West. On a broader scale, the intervention could trigger new waves of economic instability across energy markets, especially in regions dependent on Venezuelan oil. Countries like China, India, and Cuba, longtime recipients of discounted Venezuelan oil, will feel the economic and diplomatic fallout. This intervention has the potential to reshape global alliances and energy security for years to come. As we consider the global impact, let's turn to the future. What are the potential scenarios that could emerge from this crisis? Looking ahead, the future of this geopolitical chess game could unfold in a few distinct ways. Let's consider three possible scenarios, each with its own set of implications for Russia, the US, and the world. Scenario 1. The best case, diplomatic resurgence. In this scenario, Russia uses the US actions in Venezuela to rally support from other nations, pushing back against US dominance in global energy markets. The West remains divided, and NATO struggles to maintain cohesion. Russia leverages its energy resources, including its oil and natural gas, to stabilize its economy and secure its interests in regions like Ukraine and the Middle East. Putin manages to maintain both domestic control and international influence. Scenario 2. The middle ground, continued strain. Here, the geopolitical pressure builds but doesn't reach a breaking point. Russia faces economic strain from falling oil revenues and sanctions, but avoids a full-blown conflict with the West. The US maintains its pressure on Russia, especially regarding Ukraine and the Shadow Fleet, but both sides engage in a prolonged standoff, with economic and diplomatic implications stretching out for years. Scenario 3. The worst case, global escalation. In the worst-case scenario, Russia's Shadow Fleet is dismantled, and the West, unified in its stance, escalates the conflict in Ukraine. Oil prices collapse further, and Russia finds itself in an existential struggle, both economically and politically, against the combined might of the West. The global order shifts, and the international power balance is irreversibly altered. Now let's bring it all together and look at the ultimate insight we can glean from this situation. The US intervention in Venezuela has set in motion a series of events that will shape the future of global politics, energy markets, and Russia's position in the world. From the immediate loss of strategic alliances to the long-term threats to Russia's energy exports and its geopolitical influence, the ramifications are massive. But what's clear is that this is only the beginning of a much larger global shift. For Vladimir Putin, this moment demands urgent strategic recalibration. Every move must be carefully calculated, and Russia's future may hinge on its ability to adapt to the changing landscape. As the US continues to press its agenda, Russia can no longer afford to sit on the sidelines. It's a high-stakes game, one that will define the balance of power for years to come. The world is watching, and the next steps could make or break nations. Will Russia adapt and regain its influence? Or will the West's aggressive tactics usher in a new era of dominance? The answers lie in the actions of today.